So I want to welcome everybody here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Janet Singer. I am one of the founders and the political director of Crimson Goes Blue. I'm going to share my screen so we can start some slides. And tonight you'll be hearing from me, and you'll also be hearing from Taylor Holden, who is the senior advisor to Blueprint, and Adam Blackwell, who is the development director of Swing Left. Crimson Goes Blue, for those of you who are new to us, is an organization of Harvard alumni and affiliates whose mission is to forge a more just American democracy. And one of the things that we've helped create for our members is the Crimson Goes Blueprint portfolio. And we are so excited about this as a tool for giving smartly to Democratic candidates and groups on the ground that we want to spread the word. And so we've asked our members to invite their friends who share our concerns about the state of our democracy and our commitment to our democracy. And so I really want to welcome everybody tonight, Crimson Goes Blue members, friends, family, and even a couple former Republicans, because we are all working for our democracy. What we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to give a little background on political giving, and we'll talk about how we select the competitive races up and down the ballot that are in the portfolio. Taylor is going to talk about vetting the grassroots groups on the ground and why they're so important. And we'll talk a little bit about Crimson Goes Blue in our networks, and we will try to leave plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. If you have questions as we go along, please put them in the chat so we will have them for the end session. So first, I want to start with a little video from one of my classmates, Sabrina Peck, about why she gives to Blueprint.
What I like about Blueprint is that they make my political spending more effective than it otherwise would be. They have data and algorithms that ensure that my contribution is going to go.
That's Sabrina, who started City Step.
Last election, I threw money at every race I could in my desperation, only to discover that some of those races would have been won anyway, and others had no chance of winning. So I'm very grateful to Crimson Goes Blue for connecting us to Blueprint so we can target our political giving to where it's going to make the most difference in saving our democracy.
So if you've ever donated to a campaign, you know that it can sometimes really be frustrating. You got to sort through a zillion options, and then you get these desperate pleading emails, you know, if you don't give to my campaign in the next 3 minutes, all is over for democracy. And then you get this kind of endless spam that keeps coming. Now, many of us would love to get money out of politics altogether, but the reality is that without funding, you can't run a campaign or organize communities to be involved in the electoral process. But you can give smarter, and that's what we're trying to help you do with this portfolio that we've put together. The Crimson Goes Blueprint portfolio is a political giving platform that enables donors to make effective year-round investments in high-impact organizations and also political candidates in the close winnable races. As one donor said, she said, I invest with Blueprint because during the last election, I was a classic rage donator. Now, I don't know if any of you have been rage donators, but I know I have. And she says, and I scattered my limited resources unwisely. I'm still mad, but Blueprint helps me channel my anger, activism, and donations much more intelligently. So what we try to do with the portfolio is, in terms of the Democratic candidates that we support, is first we look at which races are competitive. We know we all want to defend the House, we want to keep our hold on the Senate, and we want to support down ballot races. but we need to figure out which are the competitive races where our money is going to matter. And we look at the partisan lean of the different districts, as well as the fundraising history. So how much has a candidate already raised? Do they need our money or not? And the quality of candidates. It has to be somebody who can win. In addition to that, we look at which races are consequential. What races affect who holds the levers of power in our government? So you can have a competitive race in Massachusetts that may not really have any effect if we enter into that one on the balance of the Senate, for instance. So we're looking at consequential races. And we look at where and when the funding is going to be the most effective. When we look at the where, we're looking also at the down ballot races where money goes farther in these smaller races, and the governorships and state legislative races are often the races that control the integrity of elections and how elections are administered. So for those of you worried about the future of our democracy, these are really important races to give to, and they're also races where your dollar goes a lot farther than some of the federal races, which we also support. Then we look at when to give the money. When you give early in the campaign cycle, that helps candidates a lot because that money goes to hiring staff so you can really get out the vote. And it also goes to, if it's going to buying ads, for instance, the ads are much less expensive at the beginning of the cycle than they are if you're purchasing them in the last couple of weeks of the election. What we know is that 45% of donations through Act Blue, and for those of you who are not familiar, Act Blue is kind of the banker for all Democratic races and for most of the Democratic groups on the ground. And 45% of the money given to them in the last midterms was given in Q3 and Q4, so right before the election, past the time when the campaigns are hiring staff and past the time where you can really make long-term investments in communities. So that's what we're looking at: competitiveness, consequential races, and the timing. I am going to now turn the floor over to Taylor to talk to us about those high-impact civic groups. Taylor.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, for Janet, for inviting me to this call. It really is a pleasure to finally meet your community. I've heard amazing things about you since I, have been working with Swing Left for, I guess, more than a year and a half now. A little bit about me. I'm from Texas originally. I live in Colorado now. I'm a longtime organizer, daughter of a public school teacher and a union man in a right to work state. So organizing is really in my bones. And I moved into donor organizing and advising work about 4 years ago. And since then, I've had this incredible job, which is to talk to organizers all over the country, listen to them about their vision, their hopes, their dreams for their communities, and move them unrestricted funding so they can make them a reality, and translate that into public policy victories and electoral victories. In the last 4 years, I've advised nearly $200 million in funding to more than 300 organizations in all 50 states and US territories. I like organizations. I love them. So I'm excited to talk to you about them tonight, their utility whenever it comes to winning elections and influencing public policy, and sort of the secret sauce for how Blueprint, this incredible project of Swing Left, decides which organizations to fund in a vast constellation of really incredible organizations. So I think the first thing I'll say is why civic organizations are so powerful. First off, these are just networks of people in community with one another. They could be neighbors, friends, family members. They could be a part of the same PTA, part of the same book club, who participate in elections, not just because they enjoy it, but out of an existential desire to improve the lives of the people that they love. That is just extremely powerful. And that's powerful whenever it translates into person-to-person voter contact. The next thing I would say is there's simply not a replacement for how valuable that person-to-person trusted messenger to trusted messenger work is. A dear friend of mine who's also a longtime organizer and now works in the Biden administration has a saying about this, which is that Hollywood spends billions of dollars a year trying to get you to go see a movie, but your sister walks in the door, says it's no good, so you don't see it. Like, how often has that been us, and has that been you? Whenever it comes to encouraging people we love to take action of some kind, to vote, to think about voting a certain way for a judge or a governor or a state legislator, ultimately those who we already have a trust-based relationship with are going to be extremely powerful messengers, more so than that prohibitively expensive ad buy. The other thing I would say is that when you put funding into community-based organizing, this is permanent democratic infrastructure that does not disappear after Election Day. It is there, win or lose. These are organizers who are, running programs year over year to make races and places competitive over time. If we lose them the first time, or if we win them, lose them, and then we can win them again. Which kind of speaks to one of the other things I love about civic organizations, which is that in many ways, they're like 5 birds, 1 stone organizations. These organizations expand the electorate through voter registration, run voter protection programs whenever a voter is disenfranchised through something like a roll purge, their polling location being moved, being turned away by an election judge who doesn't know the law. And they also invest in leadership development. I worked at a Colorado-based nonprofit called New Era Colorado for years, and seeing the number of alums who were volunteers, paid organizers, and staff members who now serve in the state legislature is pretty shocking. Some of the best elected officials we have were organizers themselves. Stacey Abrams is a really good example of that. So is Ayanna Pressley, Anna Eskamani, and I'm sure other office holders who you've supported with your funding and your time before. The other thing I'll say that's very important here is that civic organizations perform a role that is unlike any other in their community. It's not the role of an elected official. It's not the role of a state or county party. They are there whenever their communities are targeted, whether that's by the police state, the state itself, or because they're disenfranchised by an anti-voter policy that might have passed. One of the current organizations in our portfolio is called Community Change Action. They're incredible. They're a national organization with sort of a distributed network of community-based organizations, more than like 40 or 50 of them who they work with and support. And one of those is Lucha, Living United for Change in Arizona. This is a young Latino-led and focused organizing effort that was born out of the immigrant rights movement. And the thing that makes Lucha so powerful, in addition to the fact that they love their communities, is that they can run a voter registration drive to add 50,000 Latino voters to the electorate, which helps tip the state towards us. But they also run trainings for what to do for families and students if ICE shows up on your doorstep. They also help naturalized citizens get registered to vote so they can begin participating in democracy. These are organizations that perform a role that not only makes communities safer and stronger, but makes it far more likely that our electorate reflects our democracy. Or rather, our democracy reflects our electorate. I'm sorry. It's 8 p.m. my time. A few other things I want to say about like why civic organizations are so effective, and then I'll talk about how we select them and step back. Janet knows this, but I like to talk a little longer than I'm supposed to. Help. So one thing I'll say is we actually have a blueprint for how to transition states from being red to purple to blue. Some of these massive state shifts that you've seen, I'd say over the last 10 to 20 years are reflected in Colorado, Minnesota, and New Mexico, all 3 of which used to be red, were more competitive. And since I wouldn't say are solidly blue, they still need to be invested in, but they're more reliably Democratic than they were previously. That's now true for Arizona and Georgia. We, in real time, are watching a national shift in the, not just like the presidential map, the path to 270, but in where we can elect US senators, where we can elect governors, where we can flip state legislative chambers. The way that you do that is not just through identifying a bench of really strong candidates to run for office. It is investment in community-driven work that does some of the things I've talked about. New Georgia Project's a pretty good example. I don't know if we're all familiar with them, but Stacey Abrams founded the organization. It's now run by an incredible executive director named Insay Ufat. And what happened in Georgia over the past several years before the 2020 election and the US Senate runoffs is New Georgia Project registered more than 300,000 Georgians to vote, the vast majority of whom were young voters and voters of color. They did that against the backdrop of the state engaging in voter roll purges that in the 3 years leading up to 2018, when the election was stolen from Stacey, resulted in more than 1 million voters being purged from the rolls, more than 75% of whom were people of color. That is not something any one campaign can take on its own, any one office holder or candidate, any one state party. You need real durable community power, direct action, litigation, advocacy to make a seismic shift in a state like that. And that's the kind of work that we fund with Blueprint. So how we select organizations is really important. Just a few stats for you. There's a really good article in the New Republic right now about very well-intentioned and really good Democrats who ran for office, but whose races ultimately took in 80, 90, $100 million in cash, outspending their Republican opponents, sometimes as much as 10-1, who lost by more than 10 points. Like Janet was saying, a lot of financial resources either show up too late or driven into campaigns that are just awash in cash that they cannot spend. I'd be happy to drop this link in the chat at some point if you'd like. The point is elections are only getting more expensive. 2020, between 2019 and 2020, was a $10 billion cycle. In the 5 weeks between the 2020 general election and the Senate runoffs alone, $950 million got spent. So the question is, what can you do from where you are with your community, with that amount of money that feels meaningful to you, to be a part of that in a way that's actually strategic, especially if you feel really called to dig in. Part of why I love, advising the civic organizations in this portfolio is because in my role, I do have a bird's eye view of what budgets are for these organizations, as well as their budget gaps, and when they're actually able to absorb resources, how much, and that they then can convert into program that has an immediate short-term impact on win scenarios. That's what we did in Georgia. As soon as I knew that one of the organizations we were funding had their budget gap closed, we moved on to the next one. So what you can see in the slide that's in front of you is some of the things we consider whenever we decide to fund an organization. One is their ability to use resources at scale and turn into program. But it's also, does this organization have a track record of impact? Do their political targets overlap with those of Swing Left? Do they have reflective leadership? And do they have more than one cycle of programming? It is a special sauce. It does mean, Blueprint and Swing Left aren't the only place to give dollars strategically, but we have an internally and externally defensible and rigorous process that means your money won't be wasted, and that I hope will solve for some of the pain points in the survey. But anyway, I'll stop there. I'm really excited to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. I'm going to share my screen again. So now I want to talk to you about the tool that we've created with Swing Left and the donor experience. What the portfolio allows is you have trusted targeting and you get quarterly updates. We've got our seasoned strategists like Taylor choosing the funds that we're giving to and the places we're giving to. You can get personalized one-on-one support if you want to create your own portfolio, and you get updates, not a flooded inbox. So when you make a donation, which I'm going to show you how to do in the next slide, when you make a donation, you will be asked, would you like to share your email with the campaign you just donated to? And you can say, no, I would not. And then you're not going to get 100 emails from the Senate race you just supported. So that is one of the big features that we love. When you go to our link, and Anna, if you can put that in the chat now, what you'll see first is our website with a bunch of dollar amounts that you can choose how much you want to give. And then you'll come to this page where you'll see the different organizations and campaigns that we're recommending. And you'll see that your the amount of money you chose is allocated to different groups based on the need and what makes sense for the portfolio. And then you can, if you want, you can change any of these allocations. So you can decide, you know what, I don't want to give to Texas, but I live in Pennsylvania and I want to put extra money into the Pennsylvania pot. So you'll have on the left the explanation of the different groups and the different campaigns. And then on the right, you can choose your own amounts, but these are the amounts that we have recommended based on what the need is for the different groups. And then you click the donate button, you pay in one payment, all 10 different choices with a credit card. Blueprint does not charge a fee. We don't charge a fee. ActBlue itself does take a credit card fee. That's true whether you give through us or not through us, but there's no charge for taking our recommendations. So in the 2020 cycle, when Crimson Goes Blue was really just very new, we worked with Blueprint for 6 months and we raised $320,000 towards the 2020 election. We supported 27 great civic organizations. Most of our candidate funding went to the state level down ballot races, and 85% of the money went to races that were won or lost by single-digit margins. That is in contrast to when we look at Democratic money that went to congressional races, half of it went to races that were won or lost by more than 10 points. So these races, again, where your money does not make a difference. So we feel very good about the track record. Crimson Goes Blue is a growing organization, and what we know from public records is that more than 75% of our members donate to Democratic candidates, but we know only about 1/3 of them donated through Blueprint. So we're really hoping to give people a better value for their donation money. And we have set a goal also of spreading the wisdom about this tool to our friends, and our members have really told us they want to share this strategic giving with their family and friends. This is our first event where we've got our family and friends here, and so I'm so excited you're all here. We did a little experiment. I posted the link on Facebook. I got nothing but positive responses. People said, thank you for sharing this thing. Can I share it with my own friends? You know, we really want to give more smartly. And then when people shared emails with their friends telling them about the tools, we also got back a lot of positives. So we're really hoping that we can use our network to spread the word. And part of the reason why we want to use our network is that we have set a goal of raising $1 million. So we know we can't do that just by ourselves. We need all of you. And so I hope you'll consider giving tonight.